And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic for Monday morning. We've got some pretty good VFR here from northeast Bristol Bay up through the Kuskokwim Valley, and then on east-northeastward here across Cook Inlet on up into the upper Yukon Valley there, and then some IFR central and east central Arctic coast, otherwise marginal VFR here over the western interior all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula. VFR, Pribilof Islands, eastern Aleutians, and then picking up the marginal conditions again from Atka Island westward, probably to the Komodorskis, and a band of IFR up here along the North Gulf Coast, otherwise marginal VFR, Kodiak Island, and the southeast coastal areas. And for the afternoon, that IFR area disappears, leaving marginal VFR behind, Prince William Sound here, down across the southeast coast, covering the Gulf of Alaska back into Kodiak Island. VFR South Central Alaska, right on up through the interior, all the way up to the Brooks Range, and then marginal VFR for the North Slope, and still some IFR there on the Central Arctic coastal areas. Eastern Bering Sea, pretty good here, actually the northern and eastern Bering. VFR St. Lawrence Island, right on down to the eastern Aleutians. Still some marginal VFR here along the Alaska Peninsula, and some of that on up into the southwestern mountains. Otherwise, marginal VFR, not too bad here for the western southwest Bering Sea and the Aleutians from about Atka westward. And then for the morning hours Tuesday, some IFR sliding into the western Aleutians here to Kiska Island. Otherwise marginal for Adak and Atka. Marginal VFR right up to the northeast there, covering the Pribilofs to St. Lawrence Island. Interior here looking good south of the Brooks Range. A lot of VFR right on down into the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island, mostly VFR. Some marginal VFR here, southern Kenai Peninsula into central southern Prince William Sound, then along the North Gulf Coast, improving over the Panhandle. And IFR for the central and eastern Arctic coast. And for the afternoon time frame here, eastern Arctic coast up there looking like it'll be IFR as the areas to the west here lifts off the coast there, with marginal VFR again from the North Slope down in toward the Brooks Range. Good conditions in the interior. VFR, maybe some marginal VFR along the Alaska Range right through here, and then IFR right along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coastline, St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait, and then IFR here in the central Aleutians, marginal for the Panhandle. Passes, Hanatuvik and Adigan, marginal VFR for the day on Monday there, especially out the north side, better to the south. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, rainy, same forecast, VFR tomorrow. Windy, looking good as well as Mentasta and Isabel. Both those passes, VFR. In fact, the entire Alaska Range going for VFR flying tomorrow. And for Tanita, VFR with marginal VFRs out low, pulls northwestward into Prince William Sound, could push some moisture all the way up into the, at least the eastern Matanuska Valley there. And for Portage, same trend, conditions coming down, marginal VFR becoming IFR, especially in the afternoon and toward evening. And for Chilkoot and White, IFR becoming marginal VFR later in the afternoon. And the freezing levels here about 1 to 2,000 feet here over the northern Bering Sea into the western interior, 2 to 3,000 feet or so here in the eastern and southern interior, right on down to the Gulf of Alaska with 4,000 feet all the way down into the southern southeast coast. And about 2,000 feet here you can see south of the central and eastern Aleutians. And for icing, nothing significant expected out over the Bering Sea, Aleutians, and much of the interior. Best chance of seeing some isolated moderate icing would be for the North Gulf Coast here on down across the Panhandle. And for the jet stream, kind of a broad area of low pressure at 33,000 feet here with several weak centers scattered around, but to the east of that trough axis, good south to southwest flow, 100 knots there, clipping the southern southeast coast. And out over the Bering Sea, west-northwest up to 115 to 120 knots there with the main jet core out over the western Aleutians. Otherwise, northwest winds, a broad area of northwesterlies here at about 65 knots. And for the 9,000 foot wind flow, we're looking at north winds here, 25 knots in the Bering Strait, gradually increasing as you head south here, 35 knots over Nunivak Island, 40 to 45 across the eastern Aleutians, extreme western Alaska Peninsula. Westerlies at 30 knots there for the Aleutians and the western Bering Sea. Pretty light here over the interior from the Arctic coast all the way down into the Gulf of Alaska. And 3,000 feet, showing south winds maybe 30 knots here along the north coast of the Panhandle, light for the Gulf of Alaska on up to the Arctic coast. And then those northerly winds here right along the western areas, 25 increasing to 40 knots there along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coast, and even 45 knots out of the north for the Alaska Peninsula. Ridge of high pressure right through here, and then the next front pushing in brings increasing winds with that, but that's back over the west and northwest Bering Sea, as you can see, staying north of the Aleutian chain. And for turbulence, with that band of northerly winds out here, could be some considerable moderate turbulence here for the along and on the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula there, mechanical type turbulence with light to isolated moderate up over Bristol Bay, Togiak Bay, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and pretty smooth elsewhere.